Okay, we're back to looking at understanding elements of poetry. And on this slide, we're going to consider sound patterns. What do sound patterns do for poetry? How do they help poetry to convey meaning? Other elements of poetry are rhyme scheme, meter and rhythm, and word sounds like onomatopoeia. These are sometimes collectively called sound play because they take advantage of the spoken nature of poetry. First, let's look at rhyme. Rhyme is the repetition of similar sounds. In poetry, the most common kind of rhyme is the end rhyme, which occurs at the end of two or more lines. It is usually identified with lowercase letters, and a new letter is used to identify each new end sound. Take a look at the rhyme scheme for the following poem. Follow along as I read. I saw a fairy in the wood. He was dressed all in green. He drew his sword while I just stood, and I realized I'd been seen. Okay, so let's look at the first word at the end of the line, and we see that word is wood. So we're going to put a lowercase, sorry about that. We're going to put a lowercase a, as you see there. Let's look at the next line and look at the last word in that line, green. Does green rhyme with wood? No, it doesn't, right? So we're going to put a lowercase b there. Now let's look at the third line. The end sound is stood. Does stood rhyme with wood? Yes, it does, right? So we are going to put another lowercase a. And then we look at the last line and see the end sound in that word is seen. And it rhymes with green in the second line. So again, we put our lowercase b. And we've identified our rhyme scheme for this poem, which is A, B, A, B. Okay? As we continue looking at poetry, we're going to consider and think about how do these rhyme schemes help us when we read a poem. Okay, I'm going to read you this excerpt from The Elephant's Child by Rudyard Kipling, and as I read it, I want you to think about this question. Does this poem or does this excerpt have a rhyme scheme? Follow along. I keep 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and where and when, and how and why and who. I send them over land and sea. I send them east and west. But after they have worked for me, I give them all a rest. Okay, so does this poem or excerpt, like I said, have a rhyme scheme? We're going to come back to that in a couple of slides when you get with your partners again to answer that question. Rhythm and meter, 2 of my favorite elements of poetry. Yay! That's why I put the happy little pencil man here. Yay! Okay, and I think you'll see why in just a little while. Rhythm is a pattern of sound created by the arrangement of stressed and unstressed syllables in a line. Rhythm can be regular or irregular. Think of how the beat of a drum produces rhythm. Meter is a regular pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables which sets the overall rhythm of certain poems. To get a better understanding of how rhythm and meter work in poetry, please watch the video clip next. Another type of sound play is the emphasis on individual sounds and words. Let's take a look at some examples of word sounds. Alliteration is a repetition of initial sounds on the same line or stanza. Let's look at the example. Big Bad Bob bounced bravely. There we see the emphasis is on the B sound. Big, Bad, Bob. That is an example of alliteration. Assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds anywhere in the middle or end of a line or stanza. Let's take a look at the example. Tilting at windmills. There we see the I sound is accented in tilting at windmills. That's an example of assonance. On the other hand, we have consonants, the repetition of consonant sounds anywhere in the middle or end of a line or stanza. The example, and all the air a solemn stillness holds. I think this one's a little easier to understand because there we can definitely identify the L sound in all, in solemn, in stillness, and in holds. So consonants again is the repetition of those consonant sounds. Next we have onomatopoeia, which I think you all understand pretty well. These are words that sound like that which they describe. Examples: boom, crash, pow, quack, moo, caress. Next we move on to repetition. The repetition of entire lines or phrases to emphasize key thematic ideas. It's also referred to as refrain in poetry. Think back to our warm up activity and the nursery rhyme. Miss Mary Mac, 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 all dressed in black, black, black. We have that repetition there of sound, okay? We're going to take a look at more examples as we continue looking at poetry. Okay, at this point, we're going to stop and we're going to get back with our partners to answer the following questions. You will see a separate document for these questions. It's going to be similar to the first one, but it'll be labeled Activity 2. And again, you'll put both names. You will work together to answer the following questions below that are on your document in Google Classroom. Please ask if you have any questions.